Hello, you're listening to the Inside Elland Road podcast with me, Joe Donahue, and YEP chief football writer Graham Smith. An unbeaten festive period, followed by 2 draws, which really should have been wins, but Leeds United remain top of the championship table for now. There'll be changes this weekend, players protected and others removed from the firing line as Harrogate Town visit Elland Road in the FA Cup. Are you looking forward to this one, Graham?
Absolutely, I am. Yeah. Can I just say as well, I'm sure all the listeners will appreciate me saying this. I love how you nail the intro in one every week.
It's just not funny. Yeah. So for anyone listening, we've just spent the past minute having the giggles, and there's not a lot to laugh about right now. The result against Hull was not a laughing matter. The performance, or rather, the gaffes that were on display were certainly not to laugh at, especially if you're from a Leeds United persuasion. Do we want to start there? Because I mean that is chronologically where
nothing
we
to smile about
should.
in my life. Il n'y a pas de joie dans ma vie, as you might say it in French. Deary me. Yeah, Hull City. I don't think everyone's seen it. Everyone's discussed it. Everyone knows how bad it was. So we shouldn't spend the entire pod talking about it. But I think we should throw the discussion forward to what is happening now and what will happen, what should happen next.
Yeah.
Because this was interesting today, actually, that Daniel Farke started to categorize the Sunderland one as more of an unlucky bounce, a divot, rather than an aberration on the part of his goalkeeper. But this one was the worst, I think, this season. Probably the worst we've seen ever from Melier. I can't remember a gaff as bad as the one for the second goal. Leeds are 3-1 up. They've got all the momentum. If he simply touches the ball over the bar, Leeds then ideally defend a corner, or you'd think they defend a corner, maybe not based on the evidence of later. But they were certainly in a good moment in the game, and maybe they go on and win that. However, completely inexplicable action, mistake, lapse in concentration from Illan Melier, drops the ball at his feet, and it's stuck behind him for a Hull goal. What really stood out to me, Joe? The instant reaction of all the players around Melier when it happened. That wasn't the response of players seeing a teammate do something like that for the first time, was it? There was a lot of frustration and resignation in those responses. Joe Rodon particularly, Joe Rothwell unamused, Peru couldn't believe it,
and they're just the ones that we could see.
And those are just the ones you can see in that camera angle, that shot that we had. But then the third goal, the equaliser comes. Farke himself said it goes right in the middle of the goal, the shot. Melier wasn't set because he came to punch, but Byram had headed it, so he didn't get anything on the punch, and then he's not set for the shot. Abu Kamara, it was absolutely written for him to score, but apparently written in French for him to score because Melier was stranded for the first and not set for the second of Kamara's goals, and they sandwiched the absolute howler. So all in all, pretty terrible goalkeeping performance, and it just brings Melier back into the spotlight. And unfortunately, when he's in the spotlight, you look at his numbers, and you wrote a piece about this much earlier in the season about his post-shot XG and how it's not good. It's not even better than average in the Championship. Do you want to just explain it?
Yeah, so like post-shot XG or expected goals on target, is sort of an advanced sort of metric, which it's basically XG for goalkeepers. Now, if anyone's not familiar with XG, expected goals, it attributes a 0 to 1, obviously with a decimal place in between, depending on the quality of the shot. It gives a numerical value to the quality of an attempt. So if you kind of think about it reversed, post-shot XG is basically after the shot has been taken, if it's on target, how likely is the goalkeeper expected to save it? And if he is expected to save it 99 times out of 100, then the post-shot XG will be 0.01 and vice versa. If, it's an incredible shot and no goalkeeper is ever going to get anywhere near it, the post-shot XG will be 0.99. With Melié's numbers, of all the shots on target that he's faced, he is below the championship average. As you said, he's in the red, so to speak. And that was the case last season. It was the case in the Premier League the season before that. He was actually the goalkeeper with the second poorest post-shot XG performance. So basically, if you want to think about it in terms of shot stopping, how good is a goalkeeper at shot stopping and putting a numerical value on it? And Melié is currently at the championship average. But again, that's, numbers on everything. And, the eye test is just as valid, especially when you look at games like that Hull match. And I mean, there have been other things as well that, that have been of concern to people watching Leeds every week about Melié. His distribution. Do you remember that Arsenal game in the FA Cup? I mean,
yeah, I always hark back to it. I always hark back to that. He was pinging it.
Yeah, he was very, very good and very adept. And you thought, what on earth? Leeds have got this goalkeeper in reserve, to come in whenever Kiko Casilla, as he then did at Brentford, makes his next error. His distribution just hasn't been that good for the past number of seasons. And it's, you feel bad digging out an individual player. And you said that on in your verdict after the whole game. It feels bad to have one player's performance dominate a game, but it did, because without those errors, if he stays, Farke said it today, if he stays in his box for the first Hull goal, he gives himself a very good chance of saving the shot 1v1. Instead, he runs out into no man's land and then gives Kamara a decision to make. And more often than not, a professional footballer playing in the second tier of England is going to be able to lift the ball over an on-rushing keeper who can't use his hands for a goal like that. The third one, the punch, again, he's probably just trying to atone for his errors. Previously, he wants to be commanding. He has been quite good at that. But again, it was the wrong thing to do because there were bodies in there. Byram gets the header on it. He's not set. And I mean, the second one is, it's one of the more egregious bits of goalkeeping I think you're likely to see in the Championship this season. And unfortunately, it's not the only instance of that, because, the Sunderland one as well. I don't take the line that the Farke did today with, that maybe it was just that it took a dodgy bounce or a divot or something. You still have to be concentrating in the 96th minute. So, yeah, that's kind of where I think we lie on Melié.
Let me read you something. Let me read you something. I've had an email. Dear Mr. Smith, I've been a Leeds United supporter since 1962, so I have some experience of seeing and hearing reactions towards certain players over the decades. I've been saying to friends for quite some time now that you definitely got a diner on Melié. Regardless of his performance, you very often find something to vilify him for. The mistake at Sunderland was as embarrassing as it gets, and certainly the attempt to deal with the ball in the crossbar at Hull was a shocker. However, to blame him for not mopping up the first goal when, not for the first time, the central defenders go missing is laughable. You blame Melié for coming off his line. For God's sake, man, he was on the edge of his area, as all goalkeepers are now when the ball is upfield. In a split second, the Hull players threw our feeble defence, giving the goalkeeper two choices: retreat or come to do the defender's job and tackle him. He's completely abandoned by inept defenders, but as usual, you're straight in trolling him and not a word about how he was left in that position. As for the third goal, he came to punch the ball, only for Byram to go up and head the ball straight to the unmarked Hull player. Once again, it's Melié's fault. Last night I saw the Liverpool goalkeeper completely mess up and give Spurs a golden chance to score, which they fluffed. I wonder if the local Liverpool paper is now hounding him out of Anfield. Leeds United were the best team in Europe with Gary Sprake in goal. I was at Anfield when he threw the ball in the net, and at Wembley when he messed up to give Chelsea a goal. But in all his time at Leeds and all his errors, I never witnessed the hatred and venom that is now hurled at Melié. Much of this is encouraged by you. He then goes on to say that Melié is not of the standard to make a successful team. Also says that none of this team are Premier League standard and will either get relegated or they'll have to spend hundreds of millions just to survive. But it is sad to witness my personal ongoing bid to always single out one player when things go wrong. I don't know that you could watch Melié over the course of a season, this season, and not at times mention his distribution, the shots that go through him that shouldn't go through him, and the errors at Sunderland and at Hull. If I had glossed over what happened at Hull, I would not have been giving an accurate report or reflection on what happened, and I would have been ignoring the biggest talking point this week, which would have been fairly ludicrous, I think. But
That would have been laughable.
I'll take this reader's opinion into account. Yes, there were other factors for the third goal. I would also say that having seen that second goal go in, it rocked the team, because I think errors like that have an impact on the players around them. The confidence in Meslier to deal with that corner, I would suggest, would not be as high as it would have been at the start of the game when it was 0-0 because of what had happened. So I'm not surprised that Byram's gone up to try and head it. And yeah, his header's gone to an unmarked player who shouldn't be unmarked. Absolutely. But then the shot comes in and Meslier doesn't deal with it. You've got to look across the season, though. You can't just look at this game and pick out how he was let down for the first and third goals. He's been so well protected this season, which gives him the number of clean sheets he has that Farke keeps referencing. But when chances come and shots come, the quality of which is being saved by his peers in this division, some of whom were available to Leeds this summer for a snip. Michael Cooper went for 2 million to Sheffield United. Victor Johansson, I can't remember the exact fee, but it was certainly less than 2 million, wasn't it? They're both outperforming him. You can't ignore those things. And I don't know that you could look at that whole game and say, I'm going to criticize Meslier, but also actually these two or three other players were equally culpable.
No, I agree. And, you know, the reader who's emailed in there has, unfortunately, through the language that has been used, suggested that the defense is inept and that they've let Meslier down time and time again. Now, everything would suggest that is, unfortunately for that person, incorrect. Leeds have statistically the best defense in the league, as in not in terms of goals conceded, but chances conceded. That means that Meslier is the best protected goalkeeper in the league. Yeah. You know, he had a clean sheet for that game against Plymouth when Plymouth didn't register a shot. He has clean sheets in several home games at Elland Road where opponents have managed 2, 3, 4 attempts, one of which has been on target. You can't say that the defense has left him you know, and hung him out to dry. Yeah, you know what, the first one, absolutely they have. Farke said as much. But when his own teammates are reacting as they did after the second goal, when Farke is acknowledging that he's not been 100% this season, that he's been poor, or rather that game was poor, then I think reflecting on what was a horrible performance is absolutely fine. Because, as you said, and rightly so, it's a matter of public record. And, you know, Meslier made those errors publicly.
And Farke has criticised him publicly for it. You know, Farke spoke about it today, said it wasn't a good performance, and also brought in the fact that Meslier could be more consistent, that he has been conceding goals that you would expect a player of his caliber to stop. And Meslier himself is not happy with his performance. So I think it's very fair to discuss it. I'd also disagree with the suggestion that every single player in this Leeds squad is not Premier League able. You know, this was something that came up in the Q&A this week about how many Premier League ready players there were. I think there are players in this team who could play in the Premier League. I do think there's going to be an enormous body of work needed in the summer if they go up in order to make it a Premier League team that will survive. But I think Ampadu could do it. I think Tanaka could play in the Premier League. I think Gnonto could play in the Premier League. I think Ramazani has the potential to play in the Premier League. Rodon, potentially. Stroik, potentially. I think there's other areas, though, that will need serious reconstruction. But I don't think you can jettison the entire team and say that they're not Premier League ready. The way Ampadu plays in this division says to me he could cut it at a higher level.
Just while we sort of round off the goalkeeper chat, because I know it's something which happened last week, and we want to look ahead. We want to move the narrative on, or the discourse rather. What would you do with Illan Meslier going forward? Because Daniel Farke said today, yes, he criticised him, but then he went on a lengthy defence of him, which he has to do to an extent because it's his goalkeeper that he stood by, and I completely understand that. And to an extent, I do support that. You have to stand by your players, particularly the younger ones, even though that Meslier is very experienced for his age. What do you do with Meslier? Because you've got the firebreak of the FA Cup this weekend, which Darlow was always going to play in. But then you've got Sheffield Wednesday the following Sunday. And then you've got Burnley, I think, 8 days later at Turf Moor. It's a very big decision, whatever Farke decides to do in the goalkeeping position.
Yes, it is. I wasn't surprised that Farke defended Meslier. I was surprised that he went on such an impassioned defence. I maybe would have hoped for something a little bit stronger in terms of Illan's really got to deliver now in training, and he's really got to show that he's responded to it. I want to see a response. He told us that Carl Darlow will play in the FA Cup, but that was always the plan. He was very clear on that. It's not a reaction to the mistakes. Darlow was always going to play in this game. It takes Meslier out the firing line. I would maybe have liked something along the lines of, it's Carl's chance to shine, and then they will compete in training as they do every week to see who the number one is, or to see who gets the nod for Sheffield Wednesday. But it was almost, don't worry, Illan, you're my number one. You'll be back in for Sheffield Wednesday. That's how it came across to me. Without so many words, that's what I felt Farke said. And I don't know that that's healthy in any position in the team. I don't think he'd say that for any other position in the team.
No, I don't think he would. I sort of interpreted it as Illan has to show Illan will be in the team going forward, but he has to show that he deserves to stay in the team. I.e., the performances have to be better. Otherwise, then I will make a decision. Which, again, I can see the merit of doing that. It's not just right, I've had the conversation with you, I've put my arm around you, I've supported you publicly whilst acknowledging, the undeniable that it was very, very poor. But then taking him out the team as soon as a consequential game comes up. I can see the merits of that, but I worry that maybe now it's a little bit too far gone, that he won't ever reclaim the trust of the fans, and possibly even more important, the trust of the defenders that are playing in front of him.
Yeah, it's very much going to be a watch and see job, this. You would expect with any player that if they don't do it, they're going to come out the team. We haven't seen Meslier come out the team yet. But you would fear that if there's another high-profile error in the same kind of realm as the Hull one or the Sunderland one, that the fans will turn in a toxic way against the player, and that's not good for the team. It's not good for the club, not good for Meslier. We had the situation where Big Sam took him out the team because he felt like his confidence was shot, and he's kind of got that in his background. It will take a very strong character to respond to this with what everyone wants to see. The big performances, big saves, just confidence when the ball comes into the area. But we'll have to. It was Marcel Bielsa said about Kiko Casilla. He determined that the players still trusted Casilla because they kept passing him the ball. He felt they wouldn't pass him the ball if they didn't trust him. Let's see how Leeds defend corners when Meslier is back in the team, and free kicks from wide areas, and when the ball's delivered in, to see if he can show that he's giving confidence to everyone.
Yes, we'll have to wait and see. Should we move on to more of a light-hearted topic then, considering that we've spent about 20 minutes discussing one of the more high-profile errors of the English football calendar last weekend. You had you hosted your Q&A this week, where you open your DMs and people flood in with questions of weird and wonderful descriptions. What were some of your favourites?
Oh, I wish you'd forewarned me. like a good producer might have. Let me see. One of my absolute favorites was asked me, what's the biggest animal you think you could sellotape to a tree? I very much enjoyed
I've never
that.
thought of that before.
My response was possibly a capybara.
Probably quite big, yeah, but also maybe a bit placid. Wouldn't
Quite
put up too much
docile.
of a fight.
Quite docile. What else made me laugh? Let's have a look. How are you doing, Graham? How's the club treating you? What have you been up to? Feel like we need to know you're good personally as well with what's going on with the club.
No, actually, I'm not going to laugh at that one. That's kind. That's
It is kind.
Genuine.
Someone who messaged in January 2021 who'd win in a fight, Phil Hay or Stan Collymore, and messaged in June of last year who'd win in a fight, Graham Smith or Stan Collymore. This week asked who'd win in a fight, Joe Donoghue or Stan Collymore.
I've got an answer to that.
Somebody asked, does the old adage that roadies get more groupies than the band apply to footballers and journalists? Someone was very concerned about the whereabouts of Phil Hay. When are you going to free Phil Hay from your shed was another one. If you didn't have kids,
what did you answer?
I said I said I'll let him out when he's finished the work that I've got him doing in there. Someone else asked, do you like capybaras, Graham? Would Joe Donoghue fit into a backpack? To which I responded, yes and yes. Then they followed up with, if you didn't have kids, would you consider adopting capybaras? If so, how many and what would you call them? And you'll have to read the Q&A for my response to that. In amongst all of that was about 300 questions about Meslier, his position in the team and his future, about 100 saying which positions are we going to sign players for, who's coming in January, and then some other questions about Farke, his ability in the Premier League, what they'll have to do in the Premier League, the stadium plans, etc., etc., and what an embargo section of a press conference actually is. So the variety was good, and the quality was good, and the entertainment factor was very, very good yet again.
Yeah, Leeds fans do make it entertaining, especially when you open up your DMs. Especially, I feel like when they know that they've got your ear, that's when they really turn it on in terms of the funniness, the hilarity stakes. So commendable. You did send me a couple of them as well, just screenshotted a few that were quite funny that I'm not sure we're able to. I mean, I'm very sure we're not able to repeat on the podcast. But needless to say, if you were responsible for one of those, there's a good chance that Graham and I did laugh at it. Particularly the ones that were at my expense, as has become quite the theme recently. So we'll be keeping an eye on that one. Moving on from the Q&A then, Daniel Farke had his own Q&A today, the press conference ahead of the Harrogate Town FA Cup match. What did you make of the injury updates? Because he said that Bamford will be out for 4 weeks, or at least another 3, so end of January. He said that 1 or 2 players might go out on loan, young players, those who haven't been around the squad, young players or players who haven't been around the squad. Kind of without name dropping, he said, kind of hinting towards Joe Gelhardt being a candidate for that. Junior Firpo and Ilya Gruev are back in the team training. Joel Pirou has had some muscular issues, and Pascal Struijk is back in team training, but it seems very tentative at this point, as opposed to him having been around all week. Who am I forgetting? Max Wober, who continues to have flare-ups in his knee after playing. It's so difficult for him because it's so stop-start that you can understand why he'll play 60 minutes, his knee will flare up, he doesn't play for 3 weeks, then he plays 60 minutes again, and the same happens. He's kind of in a cycle now. But yeah, what did you make of those revelations that Farke had to divulge today?
Incredibly frustrating. but sadly not altogether surprising when it comes to Patrick Bamford. It's just it's cyclical with him as well. He starts to get into the team a little bit off the bench, gets a couple of cameos, and then breaks down. It's desperately frustrating. Probably clears up a lot of those suggestions that people were saying that they could see him being sold in January. I don't see that being the case at all. The only possible way that would happen would be if he was fit, there was a taker with very deep pockets who could pay his wages, and Daniel Farke could be placated with a very, very good alternative coming the other way. And I just don't see those things happening in January, especially now that Bamford's out until the end of January with an injury. I don't think anyone's going to invest or risk much capital in that kind of venture. The Vober thing, equally frustrating. Because he probably would have played in this game. He'd have got a start in this game. He might have got 90 minutes in this game. We'll see if he's involved. You start to think, though, when a player's being plagued this consistently by a knee problem, is it going to lead to surgery? Is it going to lead to the inevitable? Because it just seems to keep happening. He's not been able to get into any sort of a rhythm. And there's been other little injuries as well. He had a calf at one point as well, didn't he? And the Pirou thing didn't sound altogether very worrying or threatening. It just sounded like we're protecting him. He's a little bit banged up, and he needs because he has started a lot of games of late, hasn't he?
Like a workload thing, yeah.
He's not come out of the team too often. But the fact that Firpo's back is great. Everyone will be keeping their fingers crossed that he can get back into his rhythm and back into fitness and back playing and assisting the way he was, because that red card really, really damaged his season. I think the red card is almost definitely to blame for the struggles he's had with form and fitness since, because it broke his rhythm in a big way. Great that he's back, and great that Gruev's back in team training. I wouldn't expect to see him for weeks. I think it'll be a few weeks before we'll see him. And then, will we see him? I don't think we'll see him start, but on the bench, Giavogi possibly on the bench as well, or dropping out the squad, depending on who else is available. But the central midfield options are incredible. And when he's back, Farke's got an embarrassment of riches for the number 6, number 8 roles, hasn't he?
Should we have a discussion about who we think will play this weekend then? Because I've got a pretty good idea, or at least a good feeling of who I think is going to start. I want to put it on record because I want to see if I'm going to get 11 out of 11, because it's rare, but I do think it's possible.
Okay, I'm interested. I'm intrigued. I think you've put some thought into this. I haven't, so you go for it.
I have, and now that I'm searching my notes page where I did write this down, it has definitely eluded me.
Okay, shall I have a crack?
I've got it.
Find it.
No, I'd like to go first. No, it's okay. Relax. Carl Darlow, starting off easy, considering that Farke said he will be playing. I think that's going to be a back four of Jayden Bogle, Joe Rodon, Ethan Ampadu, and Sam Byram. Stop me at any point if you believe that I've made an error.
Okay.
Midfield pairing, Joshua Gilavogi and Joe Rothwell.
Yes.
In wide areas, we've got Willie Nyonto and Largi Ramazani.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck, Harrogate. And then Matteo Joseph up front with Brandon Aronson in behind.
Poor Brandon. I mean, I know that he only has to roll out of bed and go 100 yards for this one, but do those little legs have another 100 yards in them? I mean, he's just been flogged, hasn't he?
Yeah, but he can. He's possibly the most durable player in this squad.
Please don't say that. Please don't say that about Leeds United's only number 10 just before a game. You know exactly what will happen now. Yeah.
No, I think I don't think we have any danger. I mean, I can see people tearing their hair. Well, I mean, you've torn all yours out. I can see people. I can imagine them tearing their hair out right now, thinking, "No, don't say that. The Leeds United journalist curse will come down and smite the team against Harrogate." No, I think Brandon Aronson will be fine. I honestly cannot remember the last time he was injured.
Okay. Then my sympathy would turn to poor Isaac Schmidt.
Yeah, but I mean, we've said it before. We just don't think Farke fancies him. Don't think he
Does
fancied
Bogle
him from
not get
day
a
one.
rest? I mean, it's Harrogate Town, right? And this is said by someone who loves non-league football and saw Harrogate Town before they made their way up the ranks, and loves cup upsets, and wants Leeds United to take this seriously. But it is still Harrogate Town, down at the bottom of League Two. If he can't play against them at home in a team like the team you've named, in a back four like the one you've named, then he might as well go this month, because he's not for Leeds United. Like if he has not got the quality, having played in Europe, albeit for a Swiss team, if he's not got the quality to deal with Harrogate Town, then there is no point him being at Leeds United whatsoever.
I'm just going to bring you some breaking news now, Graham. Sean Dyche has been sacked as Everton manager.
Wow, that is absolutely incredible. I did not
Obviously,
see that.
by the time everyone listens to this will be old news. But right now, this is happening right now. It's happening specifically to me and Graham.
I wish that I could reach across and just touch your leg, and then look at you out the corner of my eye, like Carragher and Henry.
Good save. Well saved there.
Don't clip that. Do not clip that in a certain way.
As if you think I've got time to do clippings. I do, and I will. The Schmidt stuff, it is frustrating for him. It's frustrating for anybody who's really wanted to see what he's about. But ultimately, Farke and his staff are the ones who see him in training every day. There will be a reason. I don't imagine that he wouldn't be in and around the first team squad on match day if he wasn't having him. Like if he wasn't being professional, then he wouldn't be in the squad, would he? It's not a question of that. It's just that clearly Farke doesn't think he's ready. And you know what? I'm probably going to defer to the guy who's been managing and coaching for the last 15 or 10, 15 years as maybe knowing a little bit more than you and I when it comes to this. So that's why I've gone with Byram at left back and Bogle at right back. I know it's only Harrogate, again, said with the potential for banana skin, but I just think get the job done in the first half. Then you can probably bring Schmidt on. You can bring Sam Chambers on, James DeBeo. We'll see what the job will be a good one. I'm sure it will. And since we've done the lineup already, do you want to go for? I'll let you go first this time. Don't worry. Do you want to go with a score prediction for this weekend?
I'm going to say 4-1 to Leeds United.
Okay. Who's going to score for Harrogate Town? Is it Jack Muldoon by any chance?
I mean, that would be lovely. That would be fantastic. Jack Muldoon was at Worksop Town when I covered Worksop Town, and I saw him score a belter from 35 yards in the FA Cup in what was a giant killing of sorts against Stalybridge Celtic. Wrote a piece with him this week because he was at Lincoln during that unbelievable run to the quarterfinals. First non-league team, still the only non-league team to reach the quarterfinals of the FA Cup in its current format. And they did for Sean Dyche and Joey Barton and Burnley with a late goal. They beat Ipswich Town. They beat Oldham Athletic. They beat Altrincham. They beat Guiseley. And they beat Brighton. And they ended up playing at the Emirates against Arsenal, which was just unbelievable. But for Harrogate, Leeds United at Elland Road is almost as unbelievable. You know, the players all had a breakfast and they all agreed that outside the Premier League top 10, it would be Leeds United away, would be the plum draw. And that's exactly what they got. There's some Leeds fans in the squad. You know, the captain, who can't play because he's injured, sadly, is ex-Leeds Academy, massive Leeds fan, who screams at the TV on the bus on the way back from games if Leeds are playing and they're being shown. So big fixture for them. Big day out. They're taking the most fans I think they've ever taken to an away game. So they're absolutely up for it. And that's why Leeds need to take it seriously, you know, because this is a great big yellow and black banana skin waiting to be slipped upon.
Yeah, I mean it's a lovely tie as well. I think for one journalist in particular, not you, because I mean you've got you've got your connections to non-league football and Harrogate, but having gone to the exercise stadium, not the exercise, it'll never be the exercise stadium to me. It'll be the Envirovent Stadium. Having gone up on several occasions over the years. I received a message this morning when someone obviously checked the draw, seen who Leeds were playing, and went, "You'd better hope no Leeds fans realise you're a veteran of the Yellow and Black Army with several tours of Wetherby Road under your belt." And I thought, you know what? Would it be the worst thing in the world if people started believing that I support Harrogate? Considering your vendetta to fraudulently describe me as a Middlesbrough fan over the past couple of weeks and months. You know what? No, it wouldn't be the worst thing. I was at Harrogate once when they beat Scunthorpe 6-0. I think it was 5-0 at half time. We were stood right behind the away dugout, and somebody who I was stood near was kept giving it to the opposition manager. And the I can't remember exactly what happened, but the assistant coach of Scunthorpe United at the time turned around and kind of made some form of hand gesture in the direction of the person who stood around me, and that was the highlight of the day. It's been nice to see the sort of the development that Harrogate have sort of underwent over the last couple of years as well. And yes, while they're struggling in League Two at the moment, yeah, it'll be a nice occasion for them. I do think they're going to get pumped though, purely because Nyonto and Ramazani against League Two defenders. I mean, it's a mismatch against Championship defenders most at the best of times. So
I just remember very painfully and very clearly Crawley away, and I remember Salford away. And I remember Pablo Hernandez playing against Crawley and Calvin Phillips, and I remember I'm sure Somerville came on and Nyonto played and were denied by Alex Cairns, and Ruter played in that game as well. So,
but this is crucially, they were both away ties. This one is a home tie.
Yeah, it should make a big difference. I mean, even if the West Stand will be full of people with very conflicting emotions, having driven in their 4x4s from Harrogate to the game to support Leeds United, I still think that home advantage and home comfort should make a big difference. I mean, Leeds United should win this game 10 times out of 10, not 9 times out of 10. And hopefully it is an entertaining one and not a ridiculous nail biter and penalties with people playing more minutes than they actually need to play, and Leeds can move on. I actually think for all the people saying don't need a cup run, it'll balls things up for promotion. I actually think the opposite. I think that even if the squad is pretty small, as Farke keeps saying, there are positions in which he needs to keep players happy and keep players sharp, and the FA Cup would let him do that to a certain degree. It would let Gruev start to make his way back into fitness. It would let Giavogi play and stay sharp. Mateo Joseph could play up top. I definitely think there's an argument to be made that the FA Cup could be helpful for Leeds for at least a couple of rounds. It's a couple of extra games until such a time as maybe you draw a Premier League team away and it comes to an end. But as long as it doesn't come to an end this weekend, which would be incredibly embarrassing. I mean, if you think that if our emailer was unhappy with my output from last weekend, were they to commit some grievous errors and lose to Harrogate, then he might be best tuning out of next week's coverage.
What do we do if Darlow has a howler? Has anyone considered that?
Then the plan is Alex Cairns. Last time I saw Alex Cairns play, he was unbelievable against Leeds United. Unbelievable. Actually, it'd be a great story. It would be an unbelievable story if Alex Cairns, who came back to the club basically as a free agent to be a bit of experience and to be a personality in the dressing room and almost, not quite, but almost like another goalie coach, if he were to get the number one spot and goal keep Leeds United to promotion and a title, that's the most romantic story I think that there could be between now and the end of the season. I can't think of a more romantic one.
Yeah, definitely can't think of a more romantic story than that. After 10 minutes ago, you were talking about touching my leg. Yeah, well, I've timed that perfectly as well. Listeners won't be able to see this, but Graham did just take a big gulp of his coffee or his tea or whatever from his mug. As I said, that's so very, very good. No, I support the idea that you were mentioning earlier about a cup run might actually be beneficial. You're thinking about it in sort of a logical, pragmatic sense of it would give him the opportunity to
I know what you're
play.
thinking.
But I've always said the magic of the cup, like, two-legged semi-finals. I mean, I know that that's only the case in the other domestic competition in English football, but I've always said that the cup is a magical experience. So a run would be excellent,
especially if it took us to a place that just so happened to have Premier League quality nourishment on offer.
Well, exactly that. Yes. I was speaking to somebody this week, and they were asking me about the nourishment options on display the further you go down the leagues. And I was saying, look, let's just say that the grub is maybe not up to the standards of a Spurs or an Arsenal or a Chelsea.
Spurs is like a restaurant. Spurs is like a Michelin star restaurant. So,
you
you're on to
need to get out more.
Yeah. Do I need to go to some Michelin star restaurants? I wonder which Michelin star restaurant I could go to and afford with 4 children in tow.
Can you imagine the look on the faces of like the maitre d' or like the front of house as you rocked up with the Smith plan?
No, I absolutely cannot. It would horrify
be
me. To be
enjoyable.
honest, I think it would horrify me taking them to Spurs. I'd feel that we were all terribly underdressed if we went on an outing to Spurs media suite for some food. Never mind a Michelin star restaurant.
Michelin star media suites, yeah. Well, we can hope, we can live in hope that Leeds do get a nice draw in the 4th round. They're ball number 27 if they beat Harrogate. That has been revealed, and the draw I think takes place on Sunday afternoon at around 5 p.m. So keep that one in mind for your diaries to see who potentially Leeds will get. Of course, if Leeds have been knocked out on Saturday evening, then that is completely redundant information. And we hope that isn't the case. But, you never can be too sure.
By the time people listen to this, if some people maybe decide to listen to it late on a Thursday night, or maybe they're stateside or somewhere else around the world and they don't get to it until tomorrow, the first giant killing might have already taken place if plucky Everton, plucky caretaker manager Everton managed to get a result against all the odds against Peterborough.
Have you seen who's going to be leading them out? Or
Well,
rather, not leading them out. Who's going to be in the dugout?
I know Popey's going. Is it him?
No, I don't think it is Popey. But I tell you what, he's not far off. Leighton Baines and Seamus Coleman will be in charge for Everton's FA Cup tie with Peterborough.
Combined age of 347.
Yeah. And again, this is the tie that pits Ashley Young against his son.
That's a nice line.
Well, it would have been a nice story if they hadn't just sacked Dyche. Now, this is maybe going off piste a little bit. I mean, it's incredibly going off piste for a Leeds United podcast. But just thinking, the Friedkin Group took over Everton very recently. They did have Jose Mourinho as their manager at Roma, which is also a Friedkin Group owned club. Could you see that potentially happening? Would you like that to happen? Actually, is the better question.
1,000,000% I would. What would he do with Jack Harrison? We should talk about Jack Harrison briefly in a minute.
Exactly, that's a natural sort of follow on from that point.
It would be incredible. It'd be box office as so often it is. Didn't he say that he wanted to take charge if he was going to come back to England? He wanted to take a charge of a team, like I'm sure he said outside the Premier League or like down at the bottom or something. There was some reason. Might have been. Oh no, wasn't it a team outside of European competitions? That was it, wasn't it? He didn't want to manage a team that like had any dealings with UEFA. I'm sure that was it. So
Well, I mean,
he'd be
if Philippe Clement keeps going at the current rate, then he might be able to take over Rangers.
just go steady, son. Just go steady. Not everyone can have a 6-goal thriller every week away from home. Only the unlucky few. Jack Harrison. So there's been a lot of talk, mostly spurious nonsense about, Leeds could recall Jack Harrison and sell him in January, or bizarrely bring him back and have him at Leeds, or more understandable, Everton might send him back because of no goals and no assists and a real struggle with belief, which seems to be the case for him this season. Spoke to the Leeds this week. They were very happy to clarify that there's no recall, so Leeds couldn't recall him anyway, which stands to reason because this was a clause that was in the player's favour. It was a relegation release clause that he was able to exercise. It wouldn't be much cop if the club had a recall, because they could simply go, all right, we're very sorry to announce that Jack Harrison has decided to exercise his release clause and will join Everton. Then 7 days later say, Leeds United are delighted to announce that we have recalled Jack Harrison from his loan at Everton. But at the same time, if the loan was to be terminated prematurely, it would require Leeds United, Jack Harrison, and Everton all to get a tick. They'd all have to tick the decision. And Leeds United are quite happy to not tick that decision. I don't believe Jack Harrison has any intention of coming back to Elland Road anytime soon. It would be a more obstacle-filled road to Damascus than the one Brendan Aronson and Max Fober have had to go down, I feel. Even the terse statement that Leeds put out in the summer when he decided to go again to Everton said it all. And then there was that whole thing about awful Leeds fans from a member of his family that was caught on camera. And Everton would have to agree as well. And they don't seem to be hankering to send him back. Of course, a new manager's about to come in, but the only way I see him leaving Everton is if someone else offers him a loan somewhere else that he wants, and Leeds are happy to say, yeah, we'll shuffle you there instead. But he won't be back.
No, he wouldn't get in the team right now anyway, so there'd be absolutely no worth in recalling. Also, anybody suggesting recall him then sell him, okay, like that. Even if that option was available, yep, you've recalled him, right? Who are you selling him to,
and how much for,
and who is buying him? Yeah, because Leeds are not going to want to sit there and make a loss on a player that hasn't played for them for the last 2 years, and just to get him off the books, or recall him and then be laboured with, actually, we've got more wage requirements to sort of look after now. That's going to impact us when they can't loan him out again, because it's 19 games, no goals, no assists this season. It's not. Yeah, it's not his best season. Let's put it that way.
It's not reaching out and grabbing me by the anything.
The short and curlies. Yeah, it is. It is not. I mean, what do you do when he comes back though at the end of the season?
Another loan.
Bloody hell!
You know what?
It never ends. You know what?
Send him to the MLS and let him go away from the spotlight and the glare, and let him score a few goals, get a few assists, and relight his fire. I was saying to someone this week at the club, do you remember how good he could be under Bielsa?
Yeah.
Do you remember how good he could be under Bielsa? And someone said to me about how that he seems like a really instinctual player. Like if he does stuff off the cuff or by instinct, then he does good stuff. But if he has time to think about it, then the stuff isn't quite so good. Dan James was a wee bit like that previously, and has cleared that up quite a bit in his game this season. If only Jack had a Uruguayan grandparent, I'm pretty sure Bielsa would sort him right out this season. The same could be said about Calvin Phillips had he not played for England. There's maybe a pod for us to do at some point, maybe a newsletter pod about life after Bielsa and what has happened to various players and what it says about what Bielsa can do for a player, and what it's like when he's not there anymore. Because the Calvin Phillips story is very stark between where he was, thanks to And those would be his words as well. Thanks to Marcelo Bielsa, and for others as well. It's incredible the kind of what's transpired since.
Yeah, an incredible revelation on the Inside Ellen Road podcast there that Leeds maybe shouldn't have parted company with Marcelo Bielsa. That is truly groundbreaking stuff.
Something
Brought to
worth
you by
saying.
the sponsor of Hindsight.
Something worth saying is worth saying again and again and again.
You're right. It is. It is worth saying again and again. Some under-21s news. Keane Coleman and Luca Thomas are back from their loan spells at Buxton and York City, respectively. Keane Coleman scored a hat-trick against Scunthorpe in National League North. Twice I've mentioned Scunthorpe on this podcast. Interesting. And got another goal and a couple of assists. Did really well, helped them move up the table, but is now back at Leeds. And I think the intention is that he either goes out on loan again to a club higher up the leagues, whether that be in the National League or in potentially League Two. I'd say maybe more likely National League. And same with Luca Thomas, because of the fact that York City and Buxton are both non-league. It means that they are able to represent Leeds 21s, that non-league club that they went on loan to, and they're also able to play for another club this season because non-league clubs are not governed by FIFA in the same way of you're only allowed to play for 2 teams over the course of an entire season. So I think we can probably expect both of them to go back out. I wouldn't rule out the possibility of them maybe moving on permanently, as Leeds have done in the past, with young players who realistically don't have a huge chance of breaking into the first team and have got 6 months left on their deals. And I'm also of the understanding that Harry Gray is now back in training with the 21s, which is good. We spoke about him on the last podcast about, when that time comes, with sort of an idea that it would be soon. I do believe that he is back in training. So if you are in the market for going down to watch a few of the under 21s games sooner rather than later, maybe not immediately, you might be seeing Harry Gray on the pitch again, which would be good. You had a story. Sorry, going on.
You can't spell Scunthorpe without Thorpe. And I was at Thorpe Arch today, where Hertha Berlin under 17s were taking on Leeds United under 17s. Thorpe Arch is also the place where Bobby Cook, Robert Cook. Let's call him Bob Cook because then he sounds like a darts player and not a 17-year-old former Perth Glory goalkeeper from Australia. He's a player who's been trialing with Leeds. There's been a few suggestions that they've signed him on a 3-year deal. He hasn't signed yet, but he turns 18 in January. He's back in Australia at the minute, has been for Christmas, but is due back in England. Wouldn't be a huge shock if that 18th birthday coincided with signing for Leeds United to be competition for Harry Christie and Rory Mahady, who have been playing for the 21s this season. In their league games, Mahady's had the shirt 9 times and Christie's played once, but Christie has been more involved with the senior setup. He was there as part of the goalkeeping group in Germany for the pre-season camp, and he has been around it a little bit more, I think. But yeah, he hasn't signed yet, Bobby Cook, Captain Cook, but he may well do this month.
Yeah, and just on the transfers front from a first team perspective, yes, of course, Leeds do anticipate a quiet window, but more often than not, especially with clubs who are good at forward planning, you do hear things in January about players that maybe are being targeted for the summer, or a contingency of if Leeds are promoted, they may then go and pursue X player or Y player. And yeah, there's a couple of names being bandied about. Not going to drop all of them right now, but let's just say that they seem like the right profile, or they certainly seem like they'd make sense. There's one playing out in Portugal, which I've been told to keep an eye on, which is interesting. Not Portuguese, but he is playing in Portugal. I can see Graham smirking a little bit there as he's dying to reveal the name. In fact, I'd love it if you tried, because it would be a great effort of pronunciation. But we'll save that. We'll save that one. We'll save that one until the summer to see if it comes to fruition. And just similar to over the summer when I suggested that Largi Ramazani would be a good signing, and then Leeds went and signed him. Again, I could maybe suggest that a little bit of inside info there. I didn't, but on that topic, I would be very interested to see what Carl Rushworth's next move is, because we've discussed him on this podcast before, but there's been talk that Brighton are going to recall him from Hull City, where he hasn't played this season. I think he's been injured. That's been the main reason, I think. But he was on loan at Swansea last year, performed really well in that post-shot XG metric that I was going on about earlier. Had a couple of loans before that in League One and League Two, and I think in the Isthmian Premier Division as well. And he's Halifax born. He was at Halifax's academy. He was at Huddersfield's academy, then went and played for Halifax's youth team, and that's where Brighton signed him from. And they're pretty good when it comes to recruiting from areas where other bigger clubs maybe aren't directing their resources. I think if Leeds were maybe looking to have a switch up in the goalkeeper position in 6 months' time, I don't think that's an awful idea. But again, we'll just have to see where that one goes, because ultimately at this point, it's just a little nugget in my head that I wanted to get out.
You're just desperate, aren't you? Just to say names and then hope and pray that Leeds United sign them.
Well, if they're clever names, then yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that is a clever name. Yeah, we did ask Farke about transfers today and tried to push him a little bit on why he's expecting a quiet January when he's a pessimistic realist. Why is he not asking for more? And a lot of what he said was because the squad is good, because we're top of the league, because I want to protect team spirit, because I've got key players back now, like Firpo and Gruev, and there's competition for places, and it's difficult in January, which is a line that we've heard so many times from Leeds, not just in the Farke era. Marcelo Bielsa said the same. A player might be coming back from an injury. He might not be in his rhythm. He might not have played. He might be too expensive. There's probably a reason why he's available. But he did caveat it all with, if there was a difference-making player that was available and could be got and could be afforded, then he would not say no. And he used the hilarious examples of Jude Bellingham and Virgil van Dijk. But his wider point was they're not going to look a gift horse in the mouth if there's a player in one of the positions he's thinking about, because he does have positions he's thinking about. 10, definitely. He's definitely thinking about the number 10 position. Fullback, maybe. And we have heard that they have been monitoring a pair of attackers and a defender, just to keep an eye on that availability. If someone was to become available that they really liked, I think they'll do it. But they're not anticipating that. So it's a little bit like the summer. It mirrors the summer a little bit, where players they were wanting were not yet available, so they waited. I can still see them doing something right at the end of the window, because it's always a possibility. But right now, there's nothing imminent, there's nothing expected. And it also wouldn't be a huge shock if we reached the deadline and they hadn't done anything apart from sending Joffrey and maybe one or two other youngsters out on loan.
I bet everybody who's stuck around to the 58th, 59th minute of this week's podcast is really pleased that we've waited until now to discuss transfer.
What's the opposite of clickbait?
Well, it's like we're rewarding everyone with a little bit of transfer info right at the end, as a well done to you for sticking out and listening to our just garbling for the last hour. I don't think we've got too much more to discuss apart from newsletters. Did that go out this week?
Yes, newsletter went out this week.
A little bit of time off over Christmas.
Over this crazy festive period, it's quite important sometimes to just take a rest and recharge. Newsletter went out this week, notebook style, with some thoughts that I'd had, obviously looking at the week's big talking point, looking at transfers, one or two other things, a story about somebody who got in touch who suffered a complete nightmare and a bit of a health disaster at Stoke that we hope gets well soon, and that's a story that we'll hopefully be able to tell with a happy ending coming soon. So that was in this week's newsletter. Sign up if you want next week's.
Excellent stuff. Yes. Thank you for listening to the Inside Ellen Road podcast with me, Joe Donoghue, and YEP chief football writer Graham Smith. And I also think we owe everyone a happy new year as well. So happy new year. and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye bye.